Recently, I had the enormous pleasure of talking to Professor Jennifer Jenkins. She is the Chair of Global Englishes at the University of Southampton and the creator of ELF, English as a Lingua Franca. She has a unique and incredible perspective and insight into what it really means to be a teacher and learner and user of English in today's modern world. I hope you enjoy it. Jennifer Jenkins, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome. I'm glad we actually made it.
Yes, we did. I'm so glad because I'm such a massive fan of your work. And I was wondering if you could maybe just introduce yourself for people who don't know a lot about you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, the work has changed. I think the work that you're interested in is probably not work I'm doing anymore and haven't done for many years, in fact. But, I mean, it's fine if you're still interested in it. What actually happened was that I studied linguistics earlier on when I was much, much younger in my first degree. And then I got very interested in Old Language, went to Oxford to work on Old Icelandic, Old English and then Old Icelandic. Decided that wasn't terribly relevant to modern life and switched to, for a while, I became an EFL teacher. It used to be called EFL, now I think it's called ELT, really.
Yeah.
English language teaching rather than, I mean, probably some people still call it English as a foreign language.
Yeah, that's what I call it, just because...
Oh, right,
yeah.
okay. So anyway, I went to do that. And very quickly, I discovered, and I think partly because I had a background in linguistics and the social side of language as we'd looked at sociolinguistics even all those decades ago. And I just very quickly realised that I was teaching in London. By this time I had a baby, and so I couldn't go very far away. I had to stay near home. And I went to teach in an EFL school in southeast London, and we got people from everywhere there. We got people from, literally Latin America, East Asia, all over Europe and so on. Actually, not at that stage from the Middle East. That has obviously happened much, much more in the last 10, 15 years. But I have to say, I gave a talk about this recently, where there were some people who were, including the a man who had been director of studies at that school in the 1980s,
Wow.
and someone who had been a colleague there. And, I said at the time in my talk, they were the best times. I don't remember ever laughing as much, having such a good time. I mean, we had a marvellous time. What I realised was that they were quite, I mean, I wouldn't say elite, but they were middle-class kids, and they were going into careers where they needed English. But very quickly I realised that although they were bright and they did learn everything I taught them, and when they did the exams they got very good marks, they would get... I was around for the very, very first Cambridge Advanced English, so I entered people for the very, very first one, and they mostly got A's, and if not A's, B's, they were good. And yet they didn't use half the language I taught them when they were outside of being tested at any kind of assessment situation. So they then started to talk what I felt was their own English, and they understood each other pretty well. The reason I started on pronunciation was because where there were any problems, they were normally to do with pronunciation. They did sort them out very, very quickly. I didn't know about accommodation theory then. That was before I started studying for my PhD, but they very quickly adjusted so that they had a much better idea than I did of what each would understand. But mostly they were fine, and we used to go down to the Italian restaurant once a month. We used to go to the pub several times a week, and they all talked English the way they wanted to. And I did notice that a lot of the things they did were the same. It didn't matter which language was their first. So there were quite a lot of things. And of course, I already knew about about language change, and the fact that languages are somehow predisposed to change in certain ways. It's a human phenomenon to want to regularise. We all want to do it, however much we think we're anarchists. We all want to do some regularising of language and other things as well. And, one of the things that has happened over the centuries, really, with English is that the nouns that we considered to be uncountable have become countable. And they were doing this, but they were doing it with ones that native English speakers don't. And so information, advice, and so on. And so people were saying they're making errors. But of course, all they're doing is speeding up. They're just accelerating the change that's already happening anyway. And some things they did that native speakers haven't done, and that's because they have other languages to draw on. So they have a much richer linguistic repertoire than a monolingual native English speaker does, of course. Anyway, because of all this, I decided I really wanted to find out more about this, and so it was getting a bit routine just working in the language school, and I decided to do a PhD.
Of course.
That would look at and that I did then, immediately after my PhD, I called it English as a Lingua Franca, and decided it was quite neat because the EFL just switched to ELF, which was I rather liked, but and it seemed to take off after that. I had looked at what happened with pronunciation. And I was finding that when I put people together sometimes it was naturally occurring, because naturally occurring is obviously better. So things like at parties, if I could just, I was always walking around with a notebook. That was in the days when you didn't have little digital recorders or iPhones with recording on them. And you had this ruddy, great big square thing, a Kumba, and with something that looked like an ice cream cornet that was the microphone.
Wow.
And we thought to set this up, even in classrooms, so that they weren't aware of it, though eventually they took no notice. They did often see when I was writing notes, they said, someone would just turn to me and say, "What have I said wrong now?" But it took about 5 years to collect all this. And then what I found was that the people, I had a lot of data, and the people who gave me the data, they seemed to be speaking with, I only looked at pronunciation, so I can't really comment on the rest, though the rest was there. But they seemed to be speaking with their own, transfer from their own first language, but very quickly adjusting it if they felt they were doing something that someone from another first language wouldn't understand, and that's accommodation. And what I found was that where their accents varied in a patch of speech, in a little bit of speech, where they changed it, they were changing it because they were accommodating. They discovering that somebody didn't understand if they said it that way, and they were changing it. But also they were getting familiar with what each other did. So, I put a couple of very classic examples in my first book. There was, when I was preparing pairs for the CAE exam, very interesting, because I had, in 4 of them, there were 2 Japanese and 2 Swiss German. And I paired them Japanese, Swiss, German because I wanted the data. And the interesting thing was, when it got towards the end, and they'd had a lot of struggles over the time, because it was really, high stakes for them, especially these very ambitious Swiss German men, and these poor little Japanese girls who were very timid and very upset if they said something that wasn't understandable. But when it got to the week before the exam, and I said, "Look, I'll ask you now, would you like to switch and have the two Swiss German chaps together and the 2 Japanese ladies together?" And they had heard their recordings. I always played back the recordings so they could hear what they were doing, and so I could talk to them about it. They could explain it. And the very interesting thing was that they all said, no, our accent is much worse when we're speaking with each other. Wow. And they were right. What they meant was they were accommodating. They were that's the Swiss Germans said. They said, "We sound much more German when we speak together." Because I did record one with each of them in their same first language pair and played it to them, as well as the ones that had the other language pair. And they didn't to do that. They actually wanted to stay with the person with whom it was a little bit more difficult. But we did, I mean, this was over many weeks, and they did get familiar. I mean, there was this wonderful example where the Japanese students was describing a picture that had 3 lead cars in it. And the Swiss chap was looking for a car to let, a car to hire. And then a month later, when she talked about a house and she described it as a grey house, he frowned, and she then quickly said, grey. And when I talked with them, went through it with them afterwards, and he said, yeah, I know she always gets her L's and R's wrong, and I had started to realise that's what she meant before she said it.
Wow. Well, I mean, this is how I first came across your work, is the work that you did with English as a lingua franca and pronunciation, and you published that ELF pronunciation guide, which was basically almost like a condensed version. Well, this is how I viewed it as a teacher, right?
But you mean the Lingua Franca core?
Yes, exactly, the core.
The Lingua Franca core, yeah.
Yeah, and for me, when I saw it, I was like, yes, this is exactly the kind of materials that we need as teachers. There's no point trying to teach an intermediate student about how to link all of their sounds together, because it's just not something that you can teach, and not something that they can really learn. Those things, they come with experience.
Anyway,
yeah.
It doesn't help the communication. I mean, I have to say, there are some. You're in Spain, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, have you heard of Robin Walker?
I haven't, no.
He produced a teacher's handbook based on the Lingua Franca core, and it does seem that he has always worked in Spain. He's there now, still decades later. But, the feeling was that in Spain, people took very quickly to this. It seemed to be that in some countries they take better to it than others, but in Spain it was very, very well received by those who came into contact with the ideas.
Well, I mean, I don't know why anybody would not want to follow a guide that comes from empirical investigations. That is a sort of clear, it's like a clear guide to the important sounds in English. It's like, to me, it's an amazing piece of work anyway. So thank you for that.
Well, that's very kind of you. I mean, I think that, quite a few people have tried replicating it. Tried to see whether they get the same sorts of findings. Yeah. I think the word stress thing is a bit of a grey area. I think it's not always clear how much, because there is the sort of slight anomaly with word stress and nuclear stress or tonic stress, because if it's not on the stress in the word, and then you're saying, or I'm saying, nuclear stress is quite important. The question is, what happens when that is on the wrong part, well, for British English or native English, the wrong. But, British, because American and British are often on completely different syllables.
Yes,
you have the word detail in British English is detail in American. I mean, there are many, many examples of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not, you can't even talk about native English word stress. You can only talk about British or American or...
Well, this is the thing, and I know at the beginning of this conversation you said that I'm interested in your earlier work, and I am, but I'm also probably even more interested in your more recent work, especially when it comes to, because I know that you've moved more from an investigative sort of like a research and publication. You've moved, well, it says on your website you've moved more towards higher policy, right? So maybe trying to make policy changes.
It's still empirical work. I mean, it's still been empirical work, but it's not been looking at linguistic features.
Okay.
It's been looking at issues, socio-linguistic issues, which my interest in anything to do with accent was all pronunciation and phonology, phonetics. It was never in those for their own sake. I'm not a phonetician, and I've never been interested in just looking at those sorts of things. I've always been interested in the social side of accent rather than in just how people produce the sound or how it travels travels in the airwaves or whatever, or in auditory phonetics, how people receive it. I'm not particularly interested in those at all. I'm interested in the social side of accent.
Yeah.
And so I was particularly interested in the social side of accent in English as a lingua franca. And as well as, initially the intelligibility, but then I moved from that into looking at much more to do with things to do with, the social side of it, how people respond to it. But then I moved after that into, having looked at the sort of whole attitudes business. I was interested in the whole business of, what people's attitudes to non-native English, and particularly to English as a lingua franca, which was the second book. And then after that, I got very interested in more to do with applications of this. And my main interest, because I work in the area, is higher education. So I got very interested. It was a time when more and more students from many other countries were travelling to study in higher education in universities around the world, and particularly they were travelling to the UK. So in the UK we have the highest percentage of so-called international students. I've always said I think that's a rather strange term, because doesn't everybody want to be international? Why do we use it just for the people who pay the high fees? But and the rest are just called home, and they certainly are very home, in their outlook. I probably shouldn't say this if this is going to be used, but in the UK, they probably, and they think of the. They'll go around correcting the English of the international students and so on, and think that and don't have any sense that their own English might not be the best to use in an international setting, which of course the university is. So I got very interested in that. At the moment I'm trying to actually get my own university to make changes to its to have a stated language policy, because they mostly don't actually state it. And then to make changes to make it, because you can't call yourself international and then carry on operating on national lines as you did 30 years ago. And that's what we've got. I've been trying to tell one of our Vice President International of Internationalisation that we make a big fuss about being international, but it's entirely symbolic, not at all transformational. I mean, we've got to move away from just symbols of internationalisation to actually transforming what goes on.
Well,
and,
I mean, maybe
a lot of ideas.
I mean, maybe that's something really interesting about your work, is it isn't just theoretical stuff. It actually talks about practical solutions, and well, I mean, and this is just my opinion. There's kind of not really much point. Maybe I'm wrong about this. Maybe I'm going to offend a lot of people, but there's not much point doing research if you're not going to sort of implement the findings, right? I think
it's something that's got to change as a result of the research. I mean, it could be something that not as widely practical as the sort of thing I do, but it can't just be so what research, as people call it. You read about it, very interesting findings, but so what?
Yeah.
There's got to be some kind of, it can be small, and in this case we got to start off small, but we're trying very hard. I mean, a book that I've co-edited with another colleague in English as a lingua franca, Anna Maurinen at Helsinki University, is literally just coming out now. It's available online. It's coming out hard copy very soon, I think next week or so. Okay. It's called Linguistic Diversity on the EMI campus, and it's a project with 9 universities, each one in a different country.
Okay.
And each one, a team of people in that university, looked at the same research questions. We led the project. It was a 3-year project funded by Helsinki and Southampton. And they each looked at a number of things, and we decided on the data collection methods. We'd all use a selection of the same methods. And then we each wrote our own chapter, and Anna and I wrote introduction and conclusion, putting it all together. And what did we find? And I mean, I don't think I can give you a prize if you guess which of the 9 universities came out worst of the lot.
Probably the UK university, right?
It was. The approach to diversity was dreadful.
Wow.
It's a monolingual campus.
Wow.
It really is. Wow. Even the Australian one was monolingual, Monash, and it did by comparison with the UK, which was Southampton. Yeah. And
Wow.
I mean, Southampton did very badly. Of course, all the others are much. They're in a better starting position because they are already in a country where another language is the first language. And in a sense, that puts their international students in a better position because they can feel much more comfortable because they are with home students who are also not native English speakers.
Yes.
So they have a more equal. They're all more equal, and one of the things that because I've been working on in testing of English language, and one of the things that that you find is how unfair things are.
Well, actually, this is something I wanted to. This is something I wanted to talk to you about. Is the keynote you gave, and the title of the keynote was "Time for an End to Standardized English Language Tests." Which is quite a. Where did
I do that?
In January 2018 for the British Council.
Oh, that was the one. Yeah, okay. Yeah, and that's now published. I mean, I did the research. Well, it wasn't really research so much. It was a conceptual piece, but a very long conceptual piece with Constant Lung, my colleague from King's College London, who I was there with for 15 years, and he's still there. And we worked together. In fact, we're doing a pilot now with the University of the Arts London, trying out some of these ideas. But we published this. The article on which that talk was based, we published it in the journal Language Teaching, volume.
Yes, I read it, yes.
Oh, you know about it.
Yeah.
So that's just a longer, more complicated version of the talk I gave. But in that talk, of course, I didn't... because we had agreed, Constant and I had agreed, that neither he nor I would reveal what our solution was, what our proposed solution was, until the article was published. So that meant we both gave talks all over the place, but we just left people.
Well, I mean, there was so much fascinating stuff in that paper, but I mean, one of the interesting things that you talk about for me is that you sort of, in a way, you destroy the idea of, well, if we're talking specifically about English exams, the first thing is that you basically prove that there's no relationship between your exam result in IELTS or TOEFL. There's no correlation between that and your academic results.
Yeah.
So basically,
yeah, they haven't been able to prove this at all.
Yeah. So which is a very important and probably shocking. Well, it's not shocking to me, but it might be shocking to people to realize that your exam results have nothing to do with your capability to succeed at learning, right?
Yes, I mean, when I did the research for my last monograph, the one on international language policy in the International University, which came out a few years ago, one of the things I did for that was I interviewed a lot of postgraduate students in my university from all around the university. They were from all the different faculties, disciplines. And they could all talk about people they'd known, friends they'd had who didn't get a high enough score in IELTS to be accepted. And they would say, and I remember saying to one of them, what do you think would have happened if she'd come? Oh, she'd have been fine, she said. Another one told me about a student on her course who had got 9 in IELTS and couldn't cope and left after the first term.
Yeah.
I mean, it's shocking. And it's not just that, it's also the fact that IELTS gives you a completely false picture of the way you're going to be communicating. And this is why we're arguing so strongly for context.
Yes, and I mean, yeah, like in your paper, you said that. You said
it has to be the kind of English that's going to be, and other languages that will be used when they get there. And the only people that know that are the people who work there on the courses that the students applying for. And the only people who know whether they can manage it or not will be the student if they have materials to look at. And between the staff and the students, they can decide together whether it's a time-consuming business, but it would be a lot more effective. So,
well, that's right. I mean, for me, one very telling thing about the IELTS exam is because they publish the results of the exam every year, and you'll see that people who put that English is their first language, so basically native English speakers, actually do worse in IELTS than for example, Germans.
Yes.
So how can it? So clearly, it's not a good measure of your English ability if even native speakers can't get perfect results. I mean,
do you know, I once tried the Cambridge proficiency exam just for fun, the use of English paper, and I didn't get an A.
It's crazy.
I have a class honours degree in English language.
Another really interesting thing that you talk about when you talk about exams is you which is something similar to what I'm interested in, is, you know, most people who are learning a language, they are obsessed with comparing themselves to native speakers. It's like they want a native accent, they want a native teacher, and even like I have comments on my YouTube channel and people say, are you speaking with a British accent? Because if you are, can you please tell me, because I want a teacher who speaks American English. It's like, really? And you say that we should eliminate the idea of a native speaker and we should talk about people as local speakers.
I mean, a good local speaker, somebody in whichever context you're in, who is making themselves easily understood to everybody and understands everybody. And that has very little to do with being a native speaker. In fact, it's weird, isn't it, that, you know, native English speakers, particularly British, I can't speak for American because I don't know for a fact, but British are heavily monolingual, and people are wanting to base their English on people who haven't been able to learn another language. I mean, you know, people who are learning a language are actually using as their model someone who is not capable of learning or hasn't been capable of learning another language. It seems strange, doesn't it?
It does.
But yeah, I mean, it is a fixation, and I mean, it goes back to imperialism and all sorts. But I've got a colleague, Jane Setter. She's a real phonetician at Reading University, Professor Jane Setter, and but she also works in sociolinguistic areas as well. And she's done some very good work on Hong Kong and did English in Hong Kong. Okay. She was giving a talk about this. I think it might have been in Russia, and when she got to the end of her talk, somebody asked her to carry on talking about it. Could she say more? And she carried on for about 10 minutes, and then she said, well, have I said enough? Have I covered enough? And she said, oh no, I wasn't listening to what you were saying. It's your accent I love.
Oh God! Well, I mean, I have to admit that some accents are very beautiful. You know, some people do have a way of speaking which is very attractive, but
usually it's not a native speaker of English. Usually it's someone, you know, it's like someone from some other country.
I mean, yeah. In my experience, one thing that native English speakers are very bad at is accommodating other people.
Oh yeah,
because you know, because I have so many years' experience with foreign students, I know to avoid certain phrasal verbs and to avoid, you know, very specific vocabulary or idioms that are not the kind of vocabulary or grammatical constructions that people who are learning a language would know.
Well, not even learning, using. I mean, that's the point about the local speaker. The local speaker knows which local language people, you know, if you're talking about, say, local in a university, well, and it's in a UK university that has a very high proportion of international students from around the world, the local, what is locally easily understood for the majority is not British idiomatic English and not phrasal verbs. They are not well understood, and that's why you so often find that international students say they understand each other much better than they understand the native English students, the home students, because the home students don't make adjustments for the local context, for the local, you know, communication. When I say local, I don't mean just geographically local. I mean local in the sense of the context of the communication context.
Yeah. Okay. So local isn't just about like a geographical place. Local is like the environment, maybe the level of formality, like everything. Is that?
Yeah. Which languages people speak, particularly. So in that environment, which languages, and therefore which kinds of English do people speak? And if you've got a very large proportion of home students, I guess, they're going to use their own idiomatic language, but, it's not appropriate if you've got a large proportion of people from other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, one thing which is sort of related to this, which is a question I have in my own mind, is that there's kind of versions of English which have like Globish, for example, which is like a version of English with a very limited set of vocabulary and grammar.
Yeah, but it's made up. It's not based on empirical data. It's just what Jean-Paul Nerrière has made up. He's invented it.
Yeah, and, exactly. And I think some of the criticism that I've read is that, well, what you're actually doing is you're limiting. You're saying that you only have this language to use, and so you're limiting people's ability to
absolutely.
To express
I mean, English as a lingua franca is exactly the opposite. It doesn't do any limiting. And in fact, the idea of English as a multi-lingua franca, which is what I moved on to 2 or 3 years ago, where we need to pay much more attention to the other languages of ELF users. It's not just that they have a much richer resource to draw on if they have other languages, and they can draw on all of that depending on who they're talking with, and that can include drawing on other languages. So they can do what's called translanguaging. They're in and out of other languages if that's appropriate at that moment in that conversation, obviously not leaving anybody behind. So you don't do it if somebody doesn't speak another language, a particular language, but it's a much richer thing. There are no limits on it. The only limit is that you need to try and accommodate.
Yes,
but
yes.
That's your judgment. Other than the limit, the accommodation, which is not a linguistic limit. It's not limiting the language. It's just trying to persuade people that they need to make sure their language is suitable for the particular context. But that's it. It's not like Nerrière's 150 words or whatever, or is it 1,500? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's 1,500. I'm not sure because I never really looked at the at the list. And
I wanted to say to him, how did you decide? How do you know? Who says? I don't know those words.
Well, it's so funny. I mean, the more that you learn about language, the more you realise that so many things that become what we consider rules have originated from people just sort of making something up and people blindly following it. It's often based on mathematics and Latin. I mean, a lot of the earlier rules were very much based on. That's why we're not supposed to. I mean, still people do this. They say you mustn't split an infinitive, and the only reason that became a rule was because in Latin the infinitive is part of the verb. It's not separate, so you can't split it. Do something is one word. It's incredible, isn't it? It's incredible, and even if you look at some of the famous style guides like Strunk and White, they're just a couple of guys who just made up some stuff that they personally liked.
The double negative based on maths, 2 negatives make a positive. Yeah, but Chaucer would use 2 or 3 in a sentence. So did Shakespeare. And nobody's criticised them. And Jane Austen did as well. I mean, it just reinforces the negativity of the point.
Yes, exactly.
Because it became associated with sort of socially lower class people. It really is ostracised and stigmatised even. I remember somebody once saying, I can't remember where I read this, that if somebody uses even one double negative...
Sorry. Go away, Kat.
I'm hoping mine will come up so you can see. Now, if somebody uses even one double negative, they then know that they're a lower social class.
God, I mean that's amazing.
In Spanish you can have it, can't you?
Well, that's something which fascinates me personally about language is how much of language is part of culture and all of the stuff that comes with that, like you say, the
because Romance languages have double negatives. I mean, don't they? That it's not a problem I'm not good on Spanish, but French I know has double negatives.
Yeah, Spanish has double negatives, absolutely, yeah.
I thought Spanish did, yeah.
So something I wanted to just ask you is, because you have so much experience in the world of well, you really understand the social side of language learning and the research. And I mean, what do you think of the state in general of language teaching in your experience?
To be honest, I don't know. I've been so detached from it for the last 20 years that I don't really know what goes on any longer.
Okay.
And it depends what you mean by language teaching. I think probably a lot of it is pretty, not thinking about English now, thinking about other languages. I think they were very slow to start teaching a more communicative type of language use. It was definitely EFL that became the first to do that, as far as I know. But within English, I would say that it's still too controlled by people who are just haven't caught up with the way the world is now. That they are still focusing too much on the idea that people learn a language to talk to its native speakers. And I notice among my colleagues, I'm in a department of modern languages, and it's now modern languages and linguistics. It used to be just modern languages, but I noticed that sometimes if we're working on a project with a group of people from other countries and somebody uses English that isn't native-like, they may be French, they may be Spanish, they may be Italian or whatever, and the attitude seems to be, this would be with someone who's done a major, did their first degree in Spanish, the whole thing was in Spanish, or it was in German, or it was in French, and they speak it like the natives do. Well, I could do it, why can't they? And they haven't got the notion of a language that is simply a lingua franca, a tool of communication. It is not learned. Its purpose is not, even if it's still taught as if its purpose is to talk to the natives, that is not what it's for. In the 21st century, English is a language of global communication. And most of that is not with native English speakers, because there aren't enough of us. Yeah. Most people don't even meet one.
Well, exactly. I read that, I read, and I think it's true that 85% of conversations are between non-native speakers in English.
It probably is true, yes. Yeah. I mean, it's certainly a very, very large number would be, I would say probably a very large proportion of English that's used around the world on any daily basis. Well, not even daily, but in any one day. It's probably among people who are not first language speakers, or in a group where the majority are not first language speakers of English. And I think ELF is starting to filter in to, a lot of the exam boards, the teacher training exams are now mentioning it, but they haven't really worked out, they don't really understand what it is. They think it's another kind of world English is. They think it's a variety of English, which absolutely is not. They don't really know what to do about it, and I don't think teaching has actually caught up with this yet. And I can understand the problem, because if you're dealing with something that isn't in any sense fixed or relatively fixed, the problem is then going to be, what do you teach? And you do have to teach something. And so the problem is they need to teach English, but they then need to move away from those basic rules to a situation where people use English in order to be understood and to build rapport and all the rest, which may not mean sticking with those rules that they've just learned. And that's quite complicated. It's going to take some clever people to produce materials that can sort that out.
Yeah, because I've only ever taught in Spain. I've never taught in any other country, and I thought that all of the things that I was experiencing here, I thought that maybe they were a result of Spanish culture. Like, for example, the obsession with exam results, the obsession with teaching grammar, the obsession with you kind of rote memorization. But then, when I started my YouTube channel and when I spent more time on Reddit, which is a website where, you've got language learners from all over the world, the more I realized that I think the problems are universal. That that people just like even questions like if I know 5,000 words, what is my CEFR level? Am I A1 or A2? Like, questions like this, and I just can't believe it.
I mean, it's shocking that CEFR is being used everywhere as a benchmark. And it's based entirely on how close you are to the native speaker of the language. And, okay, I can understand that in some situations what you want to do is blend in the country or with that group. And therefore, the thing you really want and that will be useful to you is to get as close as you can to the native version or a native version of that language. But that is mostly not so with English. And therefore, and to some extent, I would say with Spanish, because Spanish is also a global language. And in fact, I've got a colleague who was my PhD student, and her PhD was about this, about how Spanish people orient to English as a lingua franca when their own language is also a lingua franca. Wow. And so, which was very interesting. She's now teaching at Southampton. But yeah.
Well, what would you say to all of those students who maybe have grown up with the mentality that they want to speak like a native speaker, they want to have a native accent? What would you say to that student?
What I usually say if it's one student, I say, well, which native speaker do you mean? I mean, because, there are so many different versions of native English anyway. But, I mean, I think what I'd say to them is why? Why do you think you need this? Why do you think you want this? Because, I mean, to my ears, native English doesn't sound particularly attractive. That is a totally personal attitude and judgment. I mean, there is no such thing as a beautiful language and an ugly language. It's all in the ears of the hearer, and everybody hears differently. But I would just say, that they should think about where they're using their English or where they will be using their English, and think about how people in those situations are using English and whether native English is actually going to be particularly helpful or not. And if not, do they still want it? Or, what is the reason for wanting it? Is it just to show that they can do it because it shows a level of attainment, or what?
Well, I think probably because their teachers, tell them that's that's the objective, right? That if you can speak like a native speaker, then you win, right? It's over, right? And
I think they need to know things like that most native English speakers are monolingual, and aren't able to draw on other languages. They need to know that most native speakers of English are not very good at talking, making themselves understood, or at understanding, in situations where people come from a range of backgrounds, language backgrounds. And that actually, when you look at research, what you find is that non-native English speakers are generally much more competent in terms of communication skills.
Yeah.
They communicate better.
It's incredible. And, is it? Do you think it's just a question of marketing? Like how did native English speakers achieve this kind of status?
Yeah, I mean, well, there have already been all sorts of books about the native speaker and the myth of the native speaker and so on. And I think probably rather than attacking the native speaker myth, because it is a myth, the best thing.
Oh God.
Would be person who comes up with a course that can actually demonstrate how, that will actually enable teachers to teach their students English to use it as a lingua franca, and which, as part of that course, can demonstrate that native English is not as useful as the lingua franca, which is not native but has aspects of native English in it. The person who can do that, I think, is going to become a millionaire, or even more, like those books that people, first books, you know, the first Headway books and all those ones to go really communicative. I think the person that produces the first course book that really solves the problem of how to provide materials and, you know, generally sort of theoretical background for teachers, you know, pedagogical information that can demonstrate how we can do this, preferably not targeting any one language, but giving scope, you know, any one language background, any one country, but giving scope for people to put into it whatever is relevant, you know. So in your country's case, it would be, you know, Spanish teachers working out for themselves what they think of Spanish, you know, what would go in. I mean, I don't know. This is just not something I could do. But you know, what it needs is a way of demonstrating to people that actually English as a lingua franca users are very much more relevant, more competent, more skilled, better communicators, and that people who stick rigidly to native English are actually the opposite of all those things.
Wow.
And that native English has only one purpose, that's for conversation between native English speakers. And that's something that, by definition, a non-native speaker can't take part in.
Yes. Yes.
It is purely, native English is relevant purely for communication among native English speakers, nothing else.
Well, I never really even thought about it like that before. That's a really interesting point of view. A really interesting philosophy. I mean, this is what I think. I think that the workbook that you're talking about, this course book, I don't know if it's even about the material. It's more of a change in mentality, right?
Yeah.
That's how I
teachers still need something to hang on to, so there needs to be something, but it could be something very different from a traditional type of course book.
Yeah.
Something where they have much more input into it themselves.
Yes, exactly.
Based on their own knowledge of their own setting and their own students. But yeah.
Like you were saying about being a local, maybe like you have a local speaker and a local teacher.
Yeah, they're the local speaker.
Well, just one. If we could just go back just a little bit to talk a little bit more about exams, because there are so many students who use exams as the only way that they have to measure, the only way that's important to them to measure their English ability. It's like, you know, I got the B2, I'm a B2, I'm B2, you know, it's like, or as you said before, you know, students who maybe, who want to go to university, but they don't get the result they need, so they can't have that opportunity. So the exam, you know, basically so much, for some students, so much of everything they do revolves around exams.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think needs to change about that?
Well, unfortunately, they have to pass these exams to get into their next stage. So whatever it is, whether it's to get into university or get into a particular job or whatever, they have to have these. And until we can persuade the exam boards to change their approach, the students will have to do this. But, you know, what? So this really is a top-down thing, where we're working very hard. I mean, Constant has been doing a lot of talks with the British Council recently and so on. And we are trying very hard to persuade them that the exams need to change. And they are starting to listen. I mean, they are starting to get involved in what we've written and what we're saying in talks and so on. They are actually getting interested in this. And, you know, so as long as we show that they're not, you know, that there is a place for them in, you know, being consultants to the new styles of exam and so on, as long as we can not say we think that they just need to be thrown out altogether, I hope that the exam boards, particularly Cambridge, whatever it calls itself these days, it changes its name pretty much every year these days. I think it's called Cambridge English Assessment, is it?
Oh, probably.
When I
yes,
started, it was
yes.
Upper, and then it changed, and then it changed again, and I don't know. But whatever it's called, the one that does IELTS and all the Cambridge exams. And then there's Trinity, and then there are others. There's the CEFA, I think, is a British Council thing, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is because when I saw that you'd given a keynote, and the keynote was called "Time for an End to Standardised English Tests," and it was hosted by the British Council, who are involved in IELTS. I thought, how is this possible?
Well, they didn't know. They only asked me as the keynote. They didn't know what I was going to talk about. Quite awkward because it was the British Council and Thailand, the Thai University, Kasatsart, and between them were funding this workshop for 30 people, 15 Thais and 15 Brits, who are all interested in this field, to not testing necessarily, but English as a lingua franca in Asia or Southeast Asia, to go and have this week. They didn't know. I mean, I gave my title quite late, but I was assured I was doing the opening plenary, and then my Thai counterpart was going to do one the next day. And I was assured that there was only one person from the British Council who was there to welcome everybody and introduce it. But in previous years, he had always then left. And I was assured he would leave because there were things I was going to say that I wouldn't want to have said in front of the British Council. So he did it all. And then we were having a short break, whereupon he came over to me and said, "I'm really looking forward to your talk." So I then had to very quickly go on my computer and remove some of my talk.
Oh my God! Wow.
But
I mean,
sat on the edge of his seat right through, sort of listening to every word of it.
I mean, you have you have a lot of what's the word? A lot of chutzpah to sort of I admire that. That's a beautiful thing.
But at my stage in my career, it doesn't really matter. If I offend people, it doesn't matter because I don't need them to help my career.
No, sure, I get it.
Nothing I do is going to change my CV in any way. I mean, my CV is my CV, and it doesn't really matter what I do. So,
in the field that you work in, how sort of alone do you feel? I mean, how many people working in like the teaching and exams, how many people share your philosophy? Are you an outsider?
Well, when I started, I mean, people thought I was completely mad. I mean, they really did. What on earth are you going to? Why would you do that for a PhD sort of thing? It really was,
Wow.
And for quite a while after I finished it and started giving talks, even while I was doing the PhD, I gave talks, but people got very interested very quickly. People do like something new. And even though it had its enemies, it was ironic, really. It had enemies from World Englishes who look at varieties like Indian English and Singapore English and so on, and they didn't like it because they didn't like this idea that there was this phenomenon that basically might sort of somehow damage them because it's looking at, the sorts of things we're talking about in health could look as like errors. And then, they're not fixed like, they could describe Indian English. On the other hand, it was ELT who disliked it because they said the opposite reason. The World Englishes people thought we were coming up with some monolithic version of to compete with World Englishes. ELT thought we were saying anything goes, and so we were right in the middle. And at first I was one of a very small number of people. Very quickly, some people like Anna Mauren and Barbara Seidelhofer got interested, but it seemed to cause a lot of interest quite quickly. And I would say, Constant Lung said to me, we spoke the other day, and reckoned that ELF is now a mainstream. It has become mainstream. I mean, we've got to the stage now where nobody who talks about it explains what it is at the beginning. There used to be a time when you had to explain what it was.
Okay, so now
your audience already know what it is. but I don't feel, I mean, I'm surrounded. I've got lots of people at Southampton in the Centre for Global Englishes that I set up some years back, who are all very interested. We get loads of PhD students coming from all over the world to do PhDs in our centre, in the field. And I've got colleagues all over.
Wow.
Every year we have an ELF conference. It's in Colombo, in Medellin, this July.
Wow.
Last year it was London. The year before that it was Helsinki. The year before that it was actually in Lleida, in Spain, in Catalonia.
Oh, okay.
It's been in Hong Kong. It's going to be in Taiwan next year, and Japan the year after.
Wow.
It's been all over.
Wow. I mean,
so we have a journal. There's a journal of English. I mean, really. I felt quite alone at the beginning, and it was quite a big risk then, because I was sort of early to mid-career when I started this.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like, from a teaching perspective, and I haven't been doing it very long. I've only been doing it for 10 years, working as a teacher, and I suppose I just feel like if there is going to be any change, that. And I'm talking about more like the philosophy of teaching in general, of teaching languages, especially English. That maybe what's required is more of a kind of an uprising, like a bit of anarchy, where the teachers say, you know what, we don't want to do the workbooks anymore in class. We don't, almost like a kind of a revolution from the inside.
Greta Thunberg about ELT. But one of my Taiwanese students did describe it. She said, "This is revolution. We need a revolution."
We do. I mean, I think for me, it's really upsetting to see, especially primary school children, and it gets worse when they go through high school. But it's upsetting to see people who've been learning English in a classroom setting for like an hour a day for 5 years, and they've just got nothing. They can't even have and I feel like it's a waste, a waste of time.
Well, it is. It really is. Yeah.
And it is. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I really, it's given me a lot to think about. And it's just, I suppose I'm sort of a little bit surprised as well at how much your thinking is the same as mine. Like in terms of I don't know. Like I said, I didn't expect you to be so sort of, I don't know, hardcore maybe. Because a lot of I feel like changes in the industry, change is very slow.
It is. It's very slow because testing is very slow and conservative, because the testing boards make zillions. They make a lot of money. They don't want to risk losing that money, and because they are in charge of the tests, everybody has to conform in order for their students to pass the tests. So that's why we have to get the testers to change.
Wow. Okay. Well, it's really given me a lot to think about, and I'd be interested in having a crack at trying to create some teaching resources that could incite revolution.
Absolutely, yes.
I hope that conversation is a reminder that two of the key things that we use to measure success in English learning, which are to be like a native speaker and to pass that exam, are wrong. The only measure that you need to worry about is, can you communicate effectively? And nothing else is really important. I'm Christian. This is Kangaroo English. I'll see you in class.